Hi everyone, so today I'm going to be following on from my previous video on anorexia. I'm just going to kind of tell you the truth. Let's jump straight into it. So the majority of the year I woke up at 5 a.m. and this was because my job for every single day of my life was to burn as many calories as possible and to consume as few calories as possible, which was awfully unhealthy. And honestly, by describing my journey, I'm by no means trying to advertise it. If anything, I'm doing the opposite. I'm trying to show you how ridiculous and how unhealthy it was. So please don't take this as motivation to continue, because I'm trying to show you the opposite, but it's just I am going to talk about recovery in my next video. So yeah, please don't take this out of context in any way. But so I would wake up at 5 a.m. and my goal was to get 2 hours of exercises in before my mom woke me up, I was already awake, at 7, because I did figure skating after school for 3 hours. So it was my only chance to burn even more calories without her finding out. And she was obviously aware that I was exercising excessively. So I woke up, washed my face real quick, went into my room and just had this sequence of exercises that I had to do, which I developed. I would go back to sleep for 5 minutes at 5 to 7 for breakfast. I had to kind of eat half of what I was given. That was my rule that I had, because I felt like my mom was giving me too much food. So what I had to do was I had to eat half of it. Now, I'm going to be honest, the only way to really do that was to hide half of the food. And because my mom was in the kitchen, that meant that I had to kind of hide it while I was meant to be eating it. So I wore not this hoodie, I wore a hoodie over my uniform, and I would just have like a plastic bag in my pocket, and I would just take the food and I'd put it in the plastic bag to then throw away at school. So that was my first hard job of the day. I don't consider the exercises hard because that was just something I had to do. But hiding the food was hard because my mom was right there. Then, the journey to school was also part of the whole entrapment in this whole like battle of straining your body as much as possible. Because when I say burn calories, I don't mean necessarily working out. I literally mean straining your body in any way possible. So I had this rule that I couldn't, so in a car, I didn't allow myself to sit back, you know. It was a 20-minute drive every single morning after I'd done 2 hours of exercises, and I had to sit perfectly straight through all the bumps. Like I was holding the door handle, and I was just like, I had to sit perfectly straight. That was like my rule. And then when I got to school, I had 20 minutes to spare. So I would spend the time, I was with my friends, but my goal in the background was, okay, burn as many calories as possible. So I didn't sit down with them. So when I was talking with them, I was like walking or standing. Everyone was sitting, I was standing. I was constantly walking. If I had to go to the library, I wouldn't go to the library on the way somewhere. I would go separately. So that was like a separate journey to burn calories. So my whole day was basically like burning calories was my goal. Same went for in the class. How do you burn calories when you're sitting down in a chair in a classroom? Well, I found a way. So basically, this is like really embarrassing, but I'm just telling you guys the truth. But what I did was I would sit and move my legs under the desk. And we had these long desks like with stuff, like it was like a science lab, but for some reason we had like humanities there as well. So we had this like long desk, so nobody could see my legs, you know. It wasn't like I was going crazy, but I basically had to keep moving my legs throughout each period, like, you know. And yeah, so that was that. Now, eating wise, I started off eating nothing at school. So I started off just buying this kind of yogurty drink to drink at lunch, and not going to lunch. And so I'd have half of a normal person's breakfast, a yogurt for lunch, and I wouldn't eat until I got home. And at home I would have a snack, and for the majority of the year that was like nuts. So I'd have this like tiny plate, and I had to put I had to fill it with nuts, like, but I was just allowed to fill half of it. So it had to be like the perfect number of nuts. And that was stressful. And I didn't eat anything else until supper, which again was about hiding food, because I felt like my mum was just feeding me too much. And she really wasn't. I was eating less than my little sister. Throwing the food away wasn't a problem, but hiding it was. So I insisted on eating in my room so that I could do that. And because I had to do my homework after I got back, so I would just hide. And sometimes it would be like meat and fish. And you can imagine, I had to hide that in a plastic bag and then throw it away when I got to skating, which I was again not allowed to relax in the car on the way to. So I had to sit straight again. So my whole day was basically eating as little as possible, burning as many calories as possible. And this carried on till about Christmas. And after Christmas, I broke my knee. So I broke my knee and I couldn't skate. And the solution was that I bargained with my mum that I'd be allowed to do an hour of exercises. Exercises, obviously not involving my knee. So I had a knee brace, and I was allowed to do like whatever else. Obviously core, upper body, second leg. I would do one-legged squats because obviously like I wanted to get back on the ice. So I told my mum, look, I have to do this hour of rehab. This spiral began where I had a feeling that I was constantly eating more than I was allowed to eat that day, which meant that the next day I had to eat less. And this spiral kind of continued. And sometimes I'd have binge days where I would just come back to reality for a split second. And I remember crying so much and thinking, oh my God, my friends are just allowed to have an ice cream. But if I have an ice cream, it's like the end of the world, like it was really stressful, because I realized that I couldn't be happy day to day because my day to day was basically straining myself. And that was on top of school because I was doing public exams for Kazakhstan. And I actually managed to get all A's, which I'm really grateful for everyone who supported me because, that achieving that when you're not even thinking about work, well, you are when you're working, but your whole day is basically like just burning calories. That, I think that's pretty cool. So it's because of the fantastic people around me. But, eating wise, it kind of spiraled out of control as soon as I broke my knee, pretty much. But there was this tiny ray of hope because after I'd recovered from my broken knee, I actually made a really mature decision to quit figure skating because I realized that if I keep skating, I was scared that I would die because I was so weak. So I think common sense prevailed and I quit skating, but it prevailed for about a week after when I was like, okay, I need to exercise more at home. So instead of doing, the core rehab-y kind of stuff I was doing while my knee was broken, I started doing intense cardio with a step box, which I'd raised to the max. And that was kind of what I did after school. And because my little sister did ballet, my mum would like be away from home after school. So I kind of did that. In my head, I was like, great, that means I'm achieving my goal. And actually, I do want to touch on how other people influenced me because I got so many compliments from my classmates because I was losing weight. I was achieving what they wanted to achieve. And they were like, oh my God, you're amazing. How do you do this? They skipped lunch with me sometimes because they felt like it was good. And they always said, oh, can you give me some advice? They didn't understand. And I don't blame them. They were 13. But it just shows that, reinforcement you get from people really fuels you at those early stages, especially when you don't look too thin. All my clothes got baggy after a while, so I just wore this baggy uniform and they didn't really see me. They just saw that I was, to them it seemed like I was just in good shape for a long time until it really spiraled out of control. And obviously, it wasn't just my classmates. It was also like, people just liked it on Facebook and my pictures and, I had a six-pack. People would just be like, oh my God, this is amazing. They didn't understand that behind that lay a whole like mental prison. And perhaps the hardest thing was when I went to bed every night, I would imagine myself digging into like a massive chocolate cake or a massive sized portion of mac and cheese because that was what I craved. But then I would wake up every morning at 5 a.m. and, it began. And once it begins, that's it. And that was probably the hardest part, the fact that other people supported me. When I told my friends that I was exercising at 5 a.m., they were like, that's so good, you're an athlete, you should do extra. It all spiraled out of control, kind of binge days aside, and then I am going to talk about how I recovered in my next video, but I just want to say that the reason I'm, going into detail is because, this just shows that you can get from that mental entrapment to freedom. You can do that, but it has to be a massive step forward. You can't have a compromise, because once you start compromising, you start eating a bigger portion, a bit bigger, you feel guilty, and the next day you're gonna eat much less. So it has to be, I feel like you have to just break through. And I'll talk about how I did that in my next video. Increasing portion sizes was like my worst nightmare. Even with salads and stuff, that it had to be a certain number of salad leaves. It couldn't be any more, because if it was, then I'd freak out. And I think in a sense, I was lucky. I didn't get bulimia because I couldn't physically, and I still can't. Not that I try, but I have this thing where I can't make myself throw up. So I guess I was lucky in the sense that I didn't develop bulimia because I couldn't develop it physically. I couldn't make myself throw up. I tried to, especially when my mum made me eat loads, but I just couldn't. So I guess at least that evaded me, but it was definitely a huge struggle. Like, I'd go to a restaurant and I'd have food in my pockets. It was really, really all encompassing. Like, my whole day was just food was on my mind. A massive chocolate cake was on my mind, but then eating 3 salad leaves was also on my mind. And it was a constant battle. And for a whole year, the salad leaves just won. So there was no escape. And because I got so much encouragement from people, especially during the early stages, and the early stages set the tone, I was like, okay, well, maybe eating 3 salad leaves is actually good. And, my self-esteem kind of increased, because I realized that I am achieving what my classmates are dreaming about. I am able to lose this much weight. I'm strong. I can wake up at 5 a.m. I didn't see the whole, I didn't really understand that this was all unhealthy. I saw this as a victory. And that was probably the saddest part, that my self-esteem began to depend on how thin I am. I would pinch myself and kind of think, oh, okay, well, good job, Dario, or is that a bit thicker than yesterday? And because there's no measurement, I always felt like it was thicker, and I always was like, okay, I need to eat even less. I'm going to talk about the final stages and the breakdown that I had in summer, which led to my recovery in my next video. But thank you so much for watching. If you've got to this point, like, this is literally just a kind of an insight rather than anything. And I hope that you guys are having a good day, night, evening, morning, whatever it is. And I hope that if you are struggling because of anorexia, that you understand that it is not the end. It is just a chapter. It was a chapter of my life. It was definitely one of the hardest, but my life didn't end there. So yours doesn't have to either. And, hopefully this just gives you the idea that you're not alone. Sometimes I would run around my school in my like, I would just jog from classroom to classroom. It was so, like, looking back, it's just weird how I did that, but people always assumed that I was late. It's crazy. And I'm so glad that it's over and that I'm able to live a normal life. And I hope that it will be over for you as well. I definitely believe that. I just hope that this shows how somebody as a friend or anywhere can be going through so much in their head every single day, and you will know nothing about it. And I just hope this shows that the compassion that you give people can be valued above anything else. Do it for everyone. Everyone needs a hug. It's not just people going through an eating disorder, it's everyone. And I hope that if nothing else, that's what I can kind of tell you.